Hello, my name is Frank Caputo, and welcome to Health Comes to Mind. This will be a series of 6 programs which will address various areas that will hopefully explain that there is a connection between the mind and the body, which for a long time in Western medicine wasn't recognized, but is now. And over this period of time, hopefully we'll be able to supply you with some information that will allow you to realize that there is a connection and things that you might be able to do to assist you in areas such as addiction, relationships, physical illness. We thank you very much for being here, and we look forward to spending some time with you in the next 6 weeks. Thank you very much. Good evening. Welcome to Health Comes to Mind. Our guest tonight is Dick Krafcik, who is a life coach and a licensed clinical social worker. Dick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Frank.
Some of you may remember Dick from another series we had done on Drugs Are Us. We talked about intervention. Tonight, I'd like to ask Dick a few questions about a few areas, talking about how the mind and the body connect and how specifically, in many cases, addictions can affect both the mind and the body. So let me turn it over to Dick, my friend.
Okay.
What do you have to say about things like how the body connects with the mind and how, let's say, use of drugs or unusual behaviors can affect your physical well-being and your mental, psychological health?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point about it because addiction. And you know, you and I have heard this many times in our work together and so on, at various settings. It's a combination of body, mind, and spirit. And we'll talk about that as we go on too. But the actual addiction itself, that is a kind of a compulsive need to use something to help a person feel better about themselves, in essence relates to the idea that they don't feel good about themselves, so they look for something outside themselves, and if it's alcohol or drugs, then it perhaps can lend or rather lead to that type of addiction. So that there's never a point at which use of alcohol or drugs when it becomes compulsive, can be looked at as just that and that's all. It affects, like you and I were talking before the program, it certainly affects the body. Alcohol can have very detrimental effects on a person's physical functioning, you know, liver, pancreas, all that kind of thing, but also the brain. Very definitely there's an effect on the brain. Alcohol crosses that barrier, the body-mind barrier. See?
So let me ask,
go ahead, sure.
People are not feeling well either psychologically or physically. Would you say that many times they will use substances or even other behaviors to kind of self-medicate for their issue? I'm feeling down.
Yes, it's very often a way of a person's looking for a way to feel better about themselves. And the difficult thing about it, especially like just take alcohol for the sake of discussion, does a very good job of doing that. You know, as a person takes a few drinks and they feel better, and they may forget what's going on in their life, forget the stress they're under, and it's very seductive because it does work, and drugs too. Unfortunately, there's often a very devastating side effect to it. But when the person's in the middle of a stress situation, they're not looking at that or thinking about that, and then it becomes habitual. It becomes one of the chief ways that they try to manage the stressors in their life. And the stress, by the way, 99% of the time it's psychological.
Okay. According to Budweiser commercial, it also makes you pick up better friends and have prettier women near you. I mean,
Yeah,
that's it's the psychological part of it.
yeah. Well, and also that's the unfortunate part, that the way that the mass media plays into this and suggests that it's all peaches and cream and everything is fine when you drink, and that's and also it kind of subtly suggests that this is something you need to do if you want to be if you want to have a happy life.
Right. That's good. I should have said any beer commercial, by the way. I don't want to give Bud a plug. So people are not feeling well. They're going under whatever the problems are, stress or whatever the case, or some physical illness. You know, it does tend to numb your body a bit, I'm sure.
Sure.
And they will use this as a form of escape, or as a form of kind of like postponing the thing. You said before, yeah, it does work, but how long does it work?
Yeah, well, it's also a form of avoidance. In other words, whatever it is that's bothering them, they avoid it by using alcohol or drugs. And again, you know, it convinces the person, hey, this is good, because in their mind they're feeling, you know, it's helping us to feel better about ourselves. But again, it has the long-term effect of they're avoiding dealing with that, whatever it is that they're struggling with in their life, and it continues.
Okay. And it continues to the point that it becomes a part of their life that they can't avoid. They will do this even if things may be getting better in their life, or maybe even if the pain goes away. They'll continue with this addictive behavior.
Well, that can happen too, sure. And then they become convinced that you know, they're having a great life. They have all their Budweiser or whatever kind of wiser friends because I drink. See, and that's a trap.
Yeah, that's good. So people that say to you, well, you know, I drink because I'm financially unstable. I don't have any money. I don't, you know, my own home. You know, that sounds like a great thing, but how does that explain the people that do have their own home, are financially stable, are perhaps a multi-million-dollar movie star or whatever the case may be? They still come up with addictions, you know. So it's not something very simple to tie to it. So it's a variety of things.
Sure.
And there's other things going on in that person's mind than just, you know, I'm going to have this drink. That's good. That's good. That's great, because, you know, people sometimes, I think, feel that people become addicted to something just because they are evil in some way, or, you know, immoral in some way.
Sure.
But there are reasons behind it. Okay. Not excuses, reasons. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Makes a difference. Okay.
No, but that is an important distinction too. That because there are reasons doesn't mean the person's making an excuse, but they're getting caught up in this whole trap of, you know, thinking that this is good for them. And the mass media plays it as being very good for you.
Right. So might as well just continue with it. And then you get to the point you can't. That's great, Dick. I want to cover a couple of more points also on a different issue. So when we come back, we can talk about a couple of other odds.
Okay. Fine.
Good. Thank you. I'd like to ask you a little bit about awareness.
Okay.
That sounds strange. And mindfulness. And there are a lot of people out there that talk about mindfulness through meditation.
Okay.
And when sometimes when I used to think about meditation, I would think of some guy, you know, he'd shave his head and put on a robe and sit cross-legged on the floor. And people would feel, oh, he's going somewhere and he's going far away from what's happening. But I guess the actual thing when it comes to mindfulness, meditation, and awareness is not to go away from something, to become more aware of it and be in the present with it. Maybe you can explain that better than I can.
That's a good
Obviously
point.
you can,
That's
right?
a good point. And I haven't shaved the head. It just came this way.
Oh, okay. Gee, I didn't mean that.
Sometimes in this type of discussion, we talk about awareness. And maybe one of the best ways of explaining awareness is to give ourselves a live example. And before I came here this evening, I needed every bit of awareness that I could muster, because I was running behind to begin with. And my wife had to get something at the drugstore, and there was a gas station right next to the drugstore. And I was almost out of gas. So I came up with this great mindful plan. Look, Pat, here's what I'll do. I'll pull into the gas station, get some gas while you go into the drugstore, and then I'll pick you up when you come out, and so on. Sounds like a great plan. Well, I drove next door to the gas station, and I thought, gee, I want to get a pack of gum. And I don't want to go in there and give a guy my credit card just for a pack of gum. So I think what I'll do is I'll pull up to the pump, and then I'll go in and get my gum, right? So, and pay for the gas at the same time. So that's what I did. And as I drove off, I went to pick up my wife, and I looked at the gas gauge, and I said, oh gosh, I never put any gas in my gas tank.
I've done that.
It's a very good example of not being aware,
Okay.
not being focused.
So you have all these other thoughts in your mind, but you weren't
Yep.
focusing on what you're doing. Okay.
Absolutely, and you know, there's research that's been done, and let me see if I can look up the name of the book here. Well, if I could find it. Yeah, it's called You Can Love Your Life by Dr. Neil Warren. And he indicates the research has shown that there are about 1,300 words per minute that people are thinking as they're going about their daily functioning or even having a conversation. So an example of that is, as you and I sit here, Frank, there's really four of us here. There's you,
That's interesting.
and your mind,
Yes.
okay, and there's me and my mind. See?
Okay.
Because I can be in relation to you and relating to you, but at the same time hear these messages coming to my mind. Well, you're sitting up straight. Is the audience going to like what you're saying?
Right.
Does Frank feel whatever it may be? See, and the same with you too.
Right.
So the mindfulness is really a way of developing awareness. See? Awareness of, quite simply, what's going on with us at the present time. Very often, excuse me, we tend to think about the past, okay, and sometimes say things to ourselves like, I shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Right.
I should have done this. I
Right.
could have done that. I wish I would have done this. See?
Right.
Or we worry about the future. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen the next day? What's going to happen 10 years from now? And we spend precious little time right in the here and now, like we are now. See?
Right.
So, and now how does this relate to what we said previously about addictions, about people
anxiety,
using
right.
addiction, or excuse me, using substances as a way of feeling better about themselves? Well, very often it's because people aren't aware of what's going on with them at the present time and get caught up in their thoughts
Right.
about the past,
Right.
about the future, and again, precious little time is spent in the here and now. So what mindfulness or awareness practice teaches us is a way of really being able to connect with where we are now in our life.
Okay.
So,
So what you're saying then is that, if you're able to be more aware of what's going on in the moment, so to speak. In other words,
Okay.
living in the moment, not living for the moment, living in the moment.
yes, yes.
And realizing what's going on. You're going to have thoughts coming into your mind, but that's not exactly, what's going on at this moment.
Right.
Okay. I mean, there are a
Right.
lot of thoughts
Right.
going through your mind all the time,
Right.
but
Sure.
it's not that
Sure.
you don't want to think of anything. You just want to be aware.
Sure.
Dick, breathing. In my experience and in doing some readings on this, breathing seems to be a very important part of the meditative process, the mindfulness process, the awareness process. Is that because, you can't, if you try not to breathe, that's going to be hard, right?
Especially for
Right.
too long, yes.
Yes, that's right. But, it's hard not to breathe because you can't, But anyway, do you use breathing as far as part of any techniques that you might be using as far as getting people for an awareness or
No, I
anything
breathe
like that?
very little.
You breathe very little, as little as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Oh, good.
actually, one of the very important ways of becoming connected with the here and now is developing awareness of the breath. Okay. And the more we're aware of our breath, because that's our continuous expression of our body and our mind is our breathing, the more we become aware of that and settle back and focus on that, then the better we begin to learn how to stay in the here and now. And there are various exercises that we do and we work with clients and teach them to do that involve the breathing, involve the development of the here and now by being aware of their breath.
Okay.
And then there's a step, I'll take it one step further. It's awareness by noticing, beginning to notice, okay, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, okay, and what things are going on in your thinking, and how you take some distance from that if there are thoughts that are negatively affecting you and causing you to feel, I've got to stop this, I've got to do something to stop it, and then turning to some outside substance to do it.
Right.
So again, last thing I'll say is mindfulness teaches us how to put thinking in its proper place.
Okay.
And not get caught up and captured by your thinking.
Right. I would imagine it also helps you focus on you, because I think sometimes when you're talking about before, your mind, how do I look and think?
Sure.
You're worried about what other people might be thinking about you, but you don't think about yourself from inside. One of my favorite books is by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. The name of the book is Wherever You Go,
There you are.
There You Are.
Sure.
And it's really hard to go someplace without yourself.
Yes.
You can try to do that with drugs and that type of thing, but it's very hard to do that. And if you learn to appreciate yourself, that's good.
And the part of you that is the part that notices what you're thinking, what you're feeling, how you're behaving, is the part of you, interestingly enough, that's been with you, or I, since we're children.
Forever.
Since we're 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
There's always been that part of us that is aware of these things. But as we get older, we lose touch with that and get caught up in what's going on in our life, what happened last week, again, what happens in the future, and precious little time is spent in noticing how we're thinking and what we're feeling. And being able, well, I'm getting ahead of myself in terms of talking about the different ways.
Why don't we do this? When we come back, you can maybe talk about some of the techniques that are used, that you might use in this, and then we can get into those.
Okay.
Good. How's that?
Absolutely. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you. So, Dick, when people feel ill, whether it's physically, mentally, there's ways to take care of this, and we assume people come to the emergency room, give me a pill, it'll make it go away, or give me a shot, it'll make it go away, or whatever the case, or surgery, and it doesn't work as well sometimes with psychological issues as it does that. There are pills for mental illness problems, behavioral health problems, excuse me. But there are exercises too, and there are methods that can be used in addition to just this type of therapy, drug therapy, or physical therapy in the case of something like that. What are some areas and some things you might use in your practice as far as methods to deal with that?
Yeah, and by the way, looking at physical illness as opposed to psychological illness, like you mentioned, and which comes first, the chicken or the egg, you can't really separate, I feel, in my own experience, the physical problems from the psychological. One causes the other. And I usually lean towards the idea of most physical problems, most physical illnesses have a psychological cause. Okay, and so the more I get into my coaching practice and my psychotherapy practice and seeing people over the years, the more I'm impressed with, getting back to the first part of this whole discussion about addiction and alcohol and so on, how the AA philosophy of seeing the serenity prayer, in other words, developing awareness, and this isn't the exact wording of the prayer, but it's developing awareness, of the things that we can change in our life and the things we can't change, and asking God for the wisdom to know the difference between what we can change and what we can't change. And some of the things that people go through and spend a good part of their life trying to change are things that they might be better off accepting one way or the other.
Right.
See, either accepting that there's a need, let's say, in a particular relationship to do something about the problems they're having, get counseling, or to separate, okay, to get out of the relationship if it's an abusive relationship. And that the development of awareness comes into the picture, for example, with using the ACT philosophy. That's one of the treatment methods, if you will, treatment methods or training that I use in my practice. Well, what is ACT? ACT is, and again, it's based on that AA philosophy, even though it's not a substance abuse program by any stretch of the imagination, but it does become that. And again, it's understanding what our mind is telling us. In other words, the thoughts that our mind is telling us, and being able to distinguish between if that's something I want to believe because it's helpful to me, or it's something that gets in the way of my living the life that I want to live. Right. So acceptance commitment training helps people to accept those things that they can't do anything about, and commit themselves to living the life that they want to have. Now, what does that all mean? Well, in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which ACT becomes what they call the third wave of cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive thinking, behaving, you know, and the way our thoughts affect our behavior. Right. Now, cognitive behavioral therapy teaches individuals, and again, this is a very important, prevalent form of therapy. It teaches people to be able to challenge some of their irrational thinking. In other words, they may think, oh, gee, I did this in the past, or I did that, and I'm a pretty lousy person, or I never measured up to you know, what I could have succeeded in, or so on and so forth. And it really enables the person to take a realistic look at their life and what they've done and how they want it to be. So, now that's one form of ACT. Right. Okay. Right. But excuse me, one form of cognitive therapy. Right. But the next dimension, the next wave, if you will, of cognitive therapy is acceptance commitment therapy. It's learning how to be aware of what our thinking is and not become a slave to the thinking. In other words, being able to what they call diffuse from the thinking. The tendency often on the part of a person is when they're going through a difficult situation in their life, a stress situation, to get caught up with the thoughts. Oh, you'll never be able to handle this, or you haven't been able to handle this for the last 30 years, or the only way you can deal with it is to drink. So they get caught up in that thinking. And the mind becomes like a tyrant, and they buy into the thoughts. So what ACT teaches is how to not challenge the thoughts, but how to accept whatever the thought is and use the techniques as, well, thank you, mind, but that's not where I want to go now. I want to go towards what my values are. Well, go ahead, you want to...
No, sure. It's an acceptance situation. There are a lot of people that have illnesses, that are serious illnesses.
Sure.
And some people I've heard say, God, if I had that, I couldn't deal with it. But you see these people dealing with it, and actually doing well with it. Or physical handicaps, you know, wow, if I couldn't do that, I couldn't go out to the store and do this stuff, and this person does it. Because they've made a real effort to accept the fact I have this, and then move on from that point, as opposed to dwelling on it and just having the thoughts about how miserable this is and how terrible it is, and I'm, you know, because there's a difference there between accepting, and I have seen in my own life people that have worked well with certain physical type illnesses, therapies with the physical type illnesses, where it'll work for some people and won't work for the others. And a lot of that has to do with your acceptance in your mind as to whether or not this is going to be good for you or not going to be good for you. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm sorry. You were,
No, I was
you
going
were
to say
finishing up with
that, and that's a very good point. And part of the therapy, the ACT therapy, focuses on helping a person to get in touch with what's really important in their life, what their values are.
Right.
See. And does what I'm thinking now, I'm thinking, oh, geez, I should have done this, or I should have done, does that get me moving towards my values or away from my values? See?
Right.
And again, one has to, through the meditation, through the breathing meditation, become aware of what's going on in their little beanie there, and is that something they're getting pulled into, and it's not where they really want to go. See? And we do teach them techniques, like one simple one is thank you mind, but that's not right now what I want to be thinking.
Right.
So,
Right.
and one thing I'll say about it, and not to get caught up in the struggle with the thought, trying to get rid of the thought. See, because very often a person's like, I gotta stop thinking this, and it's like, don't think of a pink elephant. You see,
That's right.
the more you fight it. So this type
that's
of training, this type of therapy says, okay, thanks mind for that thought, but I'm still going to move towards this value.
Right.
We use, and what I like about this kind of therapy, see, if I see a person in the office, or again, it's coaching too. If I see a person in the office, and we spend an hour talking about this goal and that goal, and this way that they want to begin not being a slave to their thoughts, and then they go out of the office and continue to do the same thing or think the same way, well, I feel not much has been accomplished. See? So what we try to do is make it an active therapy. Well, in what sense? That right in the session itself, we work with the client to practice some of the ways of diffusing from the thoughts. Okay.
Well, I wish we could get into a lot more of this. Now I know what it means. My father used to say, "You're your own worst enemy," and he's probably right. Dick, I thank you so much, and we'll have to pick up on this again in another session to come along with this. It's really, really great to have you here. I thank you so much.
Well,
Good
thank
to see you again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, thank you.